Today I have a special treat for you. In this video I'm sharing a real-time, step-by-step, easy to follow, beginners-friendly art class. And there's no time lapse, this is all real time. We are going to draw a giraffe together and we're going to go through the entire process step by step. From starting a sketch, to setting up our drawing, to layering and to finishing our completed color pencil drawing. So the materials you need to join into this art class are some paper, color pencils and a bit of time, and I really look forward to seeing your creations. And we're going to go through our drawing step by step from sketch to a finished piece. We have about an hour and a half to do so, and I'm just going to show you my process of how I draw with color pencils, and we're going to take it really easy. It doesn't have to be perfect, and we're just slowly sort of finding the shape and then adding more and more details to our drawing. Before I forget, let me share the reference picture, because otherwise I start chatting away and I will forget to do so. There it is. So I run this class every week, and every week we draw a different picture, different reference photo, sometimes an animal, sometimes something else. A landscape or something floral, but today I picked this giraffe just because I thought it was a really lovely picture, and we've not drawn a giraffe, never in color pencils, and I think in the painting classes it's also been a really long time ago since we drawn a giraffe, and I thought it'd be really fun to do today. So every class we draw something different, and we go from really light and really soft to adding more and more color and creating quite a vibrant picture. So this is the drawing that I made last week, and this is the sort of color intensity that I would expect to have at the end of this class as well. So we're going to really start really light, really softly, and then build it up until we have quite a vibrant and colorful picture. And it's up to you if you want to add the rainbow in the picture or not, or if you just focus on the a bit of a rainbow in the background, but that's up to you if you want to include that or not. So every class I prepare a little sketch just on a bit of separate paper, and the reason I do so is that my sketch is always a bit light and my camera doesn't really like those fine lines, so I always have this prepared so you can see it there on screen. And I have shared the reference picture in the chat as well, so if you want to download it from there you can do so. Just quickly checking if all my technology is working, and I think that is the case. So I recommend working fairly small. So as you can see, my paper is a sort of 6. I would sort of start within that sort of size. You can work a little bit smaller as well if you prefer, because the picture has quite a lot of grey sort of on this side. So my final drawing is sort of going to fit within this space. Because the reason I work fairly small is color pencil is quite a fine medium and has fine lines in comparison to paint, for example. And of course you can work as large as you want, but it just takes longer to complete your drawing. And you can use any type of color pencil that you want. So I have a selection of wax-based pencils. This is actually a watercolor pencil. I have some cheap children's pencils that I still have lying around for a long time. These are some wax-based pencils. These are some oil-based pencils. All of it is absolutely fine, and you can combine all these pencils in one drawing. So whatever pencils you can find in your home is absolutely fine. You don't need to have a specific type of color pencils for this class. So I don't think we'll use that much pink either, but I'll put it to the side. So we will get started with our sketch, but I just wanted to quickly show everyone sort of the range of colors that we can create. I'll do this in red. And you can draw in color pencils really lightly, such as this, maybe even a little bit lighter than that, or increase the pressure on your pencil. So all the way till sort of this, where I put really lots of pressure on it. So you can really create a range of colors going from really softly, so that was sort of here, to all the way to 10. So say this is range of pressure 1 to 10. What we're going to do is really start within this side of that spectrum. So we're going to start really, really light, build it up really slowly, and then at the end, when we're happy with the shapes that we've created, we're going to add in some more vibrant colors. So start with a gentle touch, and then slowly we're going to build it up and add some extra layers and some extra intensity to the color. So I will make my sketch in brown today. I like to sketch in color pencil. I'm not a huge fan of sketching with sketch pencil first. You can do if you prefer, but I just find that the color of a sketch pencil stands out a bit too much, and yet you keep seeing the lines through your drawing. So I like to sketch straight in color. You don't have to do that, so it's up to you if you want to use a color pencil or a sketch pencil to make your sketch with. So, and the sketch is just to have a rough idea of how large everything is going to be on the paper. So I'm sort of starting with the head. It's sort of roughly going to be here. You can see from the photo that I took of that sketch. It's not perfect. So, it looks a little bit more like a head of an horse. So the nose is a little bit longer. But the sketch really doesn't have to be perfect. We'll have lots of time to make it more precise and make it more sort of tidy, so to say. And then all those extra lines, they sort of disappear a little bit. You will find that nothing is quite as permanent as it might seem. So this is going to be sort of its horn. And then the long neck, maybe slightly different angle, something like that. And then this in here, I'll go all the way off the paper. And the more often you draw, the easier it becomes to sketch something quickly. So I might make a few changes to this already. Slightly longer nose. So. And I'm not looking for a perfect drawing today. It's nice if we all create something and that we know it's a giraffe, but if your giraffe has a slightly rounder nose or slightly bigger ears or something like that, that's absolutely fine. Giraffes have all shapes and sizes, just like humans do, and we're not trying to make a photorealistic copy. So see how sort of close you get to the photo, but don't be upset if your giraffe looks a little bit different. We're using this photo to inspiration more than anything. So I think this is going to be my sketch. So you can see my head is sort of looking a little bit more down instead of forward, and I think I'll just keep it that way. I quite like it. So this is my sketch for today. Let me zoom in a little bit more. So whilst I was sketching, one of the things that I noticed is that their ears, the giraffe's ears, are quite far back. So if you have sort of the jawline, which is sort of a bit round, then their ear is sort of all the way there where their jaw finishes, which is quite far back if you sort of look at the whole shape of their face. So that's something to keep in mind. If you just make a little bit of that sort of D, letter D shape where the ear is going to be. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it is sort of quite far back. And then their horns are a little bit further forward, which is something that if I would draw a giraffe from my imagination, I would probably put the ear somewhere else. So that's where we use the photo to have a look at these sort of things. And the longer you look at a photo, the more you're going to notice and the more details you will sort of absorb and notice. I don't spend lots of time looking at giraffes, so it's something that I know as an animal, but I don't look at them in so much detail that often. And their eye, or this eye, is sort of at the, sort of where the ear sort of finishes, sort of at the same line as that. And again, we'll get to all the details later, but I sort of like to just put a little half circle in or a little shape, just so I know that the eye is going to be there roughly. But I can make some changes to that later. Nothing is permanent until we sort of decide it is so. But just as part of the sketch, So, and we are going to color this, this drawing in 3 stages. And the first stage is just to roughly color block the entire drawing out. So we just give a bit of base colors to each area, but today it's mostly going to be brown, maybe a little bit of sort of a yellow undertone, but it's going to be quite basic today. If you have a really complicated animal with lots of different colors, then the color blocking takes a bit longer, but it tends to be the fastest stage. Then the second stage is to add shadows and a bit of shape to the drawing. So we're going to add some shadows to this skull and to the neck and to areas where we think it's a little bit darker. And the last stage is adding details and textures. And that last stage takes by far the longest. Color blocking is really fast. The shadows takes maybe a little bit longer, sort of similar amount. Depends a bit on how complicated the drawing is. And then the last stage takes by far the longest, so adding the details. I am going to spend most of the time there. So when you're ready with your sketch, you have a little bit of an idea of where you want to go. And again, it really doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to stick with a brown color if you have it. You can also use a little bit of a light orange if you want. So I wouldn't go for like a fluorescent orange, but if you have sort of a yellow orangey color, you can start with that as well. It's a little bit lighter. And I'm just going with quite a flat pencil, so not using the tip, but using the flat of the pencil, just lightly starting to color in the areas that I feel are that dark brown color. And I know some of these areas will also have some yellow or some orange tones in it, so I'm not drawing out the actual spots, I'm just adding some color to that area. So here to the forehead, over that horn. So if you feel ready to join in. The ear is relatively light, I'm going to keep that white for now. Here around the eye it's a bit lighter, so I'm going to keep that light. Here over the nose. And when we're drawing color pencils, areas that we want to keep white, and by white I mean like sparkly white, because all of this is going to read really light in the end. But if you want to keep something sparkly white, we need to use the white of the paper to use it as the white of our picture. Because even though you might have a white pencil, it's never going to be intense enough or thick enough to actually cover areas that you have added pencil to and make them white again. So anything that we want to keep white, we're going to use the white of the paper. So this whole neck area. So I'm just really lightly adding a bit of color there. And whilst I do this, I also just look at the shapes to see if I'm happy with the shape. So actually I feel like maybe the nose could be a little bit longer. I'm just adding in a little bit more. So here, really lightly. Here where I change the shape, I'll just ignore the old shape and just continue with the new one. That little line here, at the end you would almost not see it anymore. So don't worry too much about going in with an eraser. Just if you want to make any changes, just draw over it and ignore what you did before. That's the easiest way of making changes. I tend to keep my pencil really flat on the paper like this, because that gives a really even application. Because if you cross hatch, you get lots of little lines. But it's more something that I use when I draw in pen, for example, or when I'm adding texture at the end. So for now, just keeping it really, really soft. And I like to hold my pencil like this. There's actually a term for it, it's called the overhead grip. So I like holding it like this, because then it's really flat on the paper. But if you prefer holding it like a pen, that's absolutely fine as well. So you can play around with that a little bit, which you find. It needs to feel quite relaxed. If it feels really sort of tense, then your drawing will be tense as well. So yeah, try to keep it quite loose. More pleasant that way, otherwise you'll get cramp as well. I studied law a long time ago, and we used to have to write these really long essays, and then at the end of the sort of exams, I always had cramp in my hands, but we don't want that. So this is my sort of base color brown. I did where the mains are. I added that in a bit as well. So, and I'm going to add a little bit of this orange color as well, just because I find this dark brown a bit a cold color. So I'm just going to go over this and do the same with a bit of orange, just make it a little bit warmer. Still just the base colors. So, I always like to sharpen my pencil. So you can see you can just change the tone a little bit by going over an area with a little bit more color. So no rush, just take your time. So this is just an initial base. And this is a really good moment to sort of check the shapes, see if you're happy with roughly the shapes that you've created. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it's almost like we're creating this really sort of soft, blurry picture. And we're slowly going to add more and more detail and a bit more intensity of color to that. So the white of the giraffe, especially here on the neck, is not actually white. It's a little bit sort of warmer, yellowy, brown. So. Maybe a little bit here around the ears. So. There we go. This is stage 1 already. We've color blocked it out. If you want to do the rainbow now, you can do so. You can also save it till the end. That's absolutely fine, whatever you prefer. So I'm just zooming out a little bit. So I think I can take my sketch away. So a little bit more space on the paper. So the second stage for actually adding color to the drawing is adding shadows. And shadows are a really great way of shaping. And the color that I like to use for shadow is purple. I think this purple might be a bit too cold. I have this slightly warmer color. I'm very lucky, I have lots of different colors that I can use. You can use blue for shadows, purple, brown. Because we're using quite a lot of brown already, I decided to use this sort of warmer purple color. But shadows don't have to be black. You can use lots of different colors for shadow. Green can be a good shadow color. But all of these colors, they give a slightly different vibe and tone to the drawing. So I'm using this warm sort of aubergine purple color. Today I like to use a different color than I've used so far, just to keep it a bit more interesting. But you can also go over it with a little bit more brown if you want. So I think this area here, even though it's not shadow, it's just the color of the skin that is a bit darker here. I think I can start there and make that a bit darker just to start with. And I want to change that shape a little bit of the nose, because there's a bit of that sort of bump here, isn't it? So just changing that shape a little bit, making this area a little bit darker. I still want to use a really gentle touch on my pencil, so I'm making it a little bit darker, but I'm keeping the pressure on my pencil really light. I don't want to create really harsh lines, or no, don't go in 10 out of 10 pressure, but maybe like a 4 or something a little bit darker than what we've used so far. But so go around that eye a little bit. So the eye is so dark that we can add a little bit of shadow there as well. So, and here around the nose, there's some wrinkles and shadows there. So if I think that shape is sort of there, a little bit rounded. And I'm not going to draw out these individual wrinkles yet, but I do want to add in a little bit of an shading there, almost like preparation for that texture that I'm going to create there later. So the inside of the nose is a bit darker. So the bottom lip has a lot of shadow on it as well, so I'm just going to go around. How far does it upper lip stick out quite far. So that whole area here. A little bit of shading. So keeping it really gentle. If you notice something that you want to change the shape of a little bit, then go for it there. This is your drawing if you want to, make some adjustments here and there. You can do that at any time. So for example, I want this jaw to be a little bit wider. The area here I think is a bit wider than what I have it at the moment. So there's a bigger difference. It's more triangle shape, let's put it that way. So the nose, I think that how wide it is I'm happy with, but I think this jaw can come down a little bit. So I'm just changing that a little bit. So, especially making areas wider is easier than making them narrower. But you can see this line where I started already sort of disappears a little bit. I don't mind it if there's some extra lines around my drawing that sort of get incorporated into the final. So here around the neck. A lot of the shadows seem to be around the outside of the shape today. So the entire area under the neck is a bit shaded. And whilst we do this, we're starting to warm up because the drawing is a bit like exercise, and when you first start, I'm assuming that most of you came from work or doing something else and that you've not been drawing all day. So you come in cold and you have to warm up a little bit and stretch your drawing muscles before you dive into the really fine details. And that's what we're doing now. We're sort of getting to know our subject, we're getting to know our materials, easing in a little bit and finding out how it feels for us today. Does it come easier? Is it challenging? Or like every day is a little bit different. Yeah, we're just getting used to the activity of drawing. So, because the mains are a bit uneven, I try to already, even though I'm doing just shading, keep them a bit uneven. So instead of just making a straight line, I'm going sort of with the direction of the hair and just make that top a bit uneven, because it's not a perfectly straight cut. You can see some hair sticking out and some areas are a bit longer and some a little bit shorter. So. And I think the underside of the ear could also use some shadow. I know it's quite light in comparison, but there's also some shading there. The top of the ear is a bit lighter, I think. You might notice some different things from what I do, and that's only natural, because we all look with our own sort of set of eyes and our own experiences. So everyone notices different things when looking at a reference picture. And you will see that at the end as well, that everyone picks out their own things that they noticed. So I think this was it for shadow. I made a bit of a funny curve in the neck. Maybe this needs to be a bit straighter. So I'm sort of ready to slowly start adding in the details. And as I said, the details really take the longest time. I will also go from sort of the rough, larger details, so these individual spots on the neck, and slowly into the fine details and all the like little wrinkles on the nose and the texture of the fur. So we'll go sort of, even within the details, we go from large to small. And the texture today is quite smooth. So this is a really short-haired animal. It's not like the panda that we did last week, where we wanted to create all this fluff sort of sticking out on all edges. So it's going to be quite smooth, but we still have these individual markings, these spots on the neck and little wrinkles on the nose and all these sort of other type of details. But we don't have to think about texture too much. So it's mostly markings and little folds of the skin. And within those sort of larger spots, I think the neck is a good place to start. There could be different types of color in these individual spots. So have a look, see what colors you see in there. Maybe a little bit of red, maybe brown, maybe a bit of purple. So I think they have quite a warm color. And I have some red here as well. I'm just going to slowly start adding these spots, these markings to the neck. So make sure all my pencils are sharp. Always work with a sharp pencil, it makes your whole life much easier. And what I'm going to try and do is not sort of draw out the shape of the marking first, but just sort of work in the direction that I think the hair is going into, so it's usually from the ear towards the tail. So, and just shade it in first, so maybe this one. It's okay if they look a little bit different from the photo, but I'm sort of starting with this large one here at the front, and I'm keeping the photo as an example. So I'm just shading it in. I might go over there a few times until I'm happy with the coloring. So I want the edges to feel quite soft, and this is why I'm not making an outline first, because they seem to sort of fade a little bit, or sort of to blend in with the color behind it. So I try and keep it a bit natural and yeah, with soft edges. So maybe a little bit of red in there. You can play around with the colors a little bit to mix it up and create a color that you feel is right. So maybe that's a bit too red. I'll go over it with a bit more brown. You can add a little bit of yellow in as well. Yellow always mixes well with browns and reds. And for that yellow, maybe I'll let it blend in with the surrounding area a bit more. And there's not one way of doing this, so you have to find your own sort of style a little bit for making these markings. Every animal is different, and every animal requires a little bit of a different approach. We've been drawing quite a lot of animals in this class lately. Every animal requires a bit of a different approach, so find the sort of way that you think works well. You can do sort of everything in brown first, sort of map it out, and then keep adding color to all of them until you're sort of happy with the color. Or you do one first and then try and replicate that same colors to the other ones. They don't all have to be the same color either. I think the ones at the top, they have a slightly different tone from the ones down here. So I'm still keeping it light. I don't want to go in with lots of pressure yet. I want to save some of this color for later still, so I have some reserve to add in a little bit more color later on. So I'm sort of looking at that photo, but I'm also making some adjustments myself. Maybe I'm not counting out exactly. I always feel a bit double about zoos, because I love seeing the animals and I really enjoy being there, but I also feel a little bit sad for them sometimes, but then at the same time they are sort of protected and well taken care of, and otherwise, you know, it's conservation as well. But yeah, although I think zoos are getting better at making the cages a bit bigger.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just add a little one here. So, just make one up. If you have a bit of space somewhere and you feel like I could use with an extra freckle, just add it in. These are the extreme version of freckles. There's different types of giraffes with different types of pattern. So I think this one, you have a rothschild. I don't know if the birds are the same in English, but in Dutch it's called rothschild giraffe, which means like red shield. And they have these really big patterns, sort of with quite a lot of white space in between. But you have different types of giraffes with different, different markings.
I didn't know that.
Some are a little bit close together than others. I'm terrible at pop quizzes, but the only category that I'm quite good at is sort of weird and wonderful random knowledge that you just happen to somewhere picked up. So I'm slowly getting to the cheek, and so here I started to add a little bit of red in here. This is just brown, but I will probably go over there and add a little bit more different colors before I'm finished. I sort of liked the idea of adding multiple colors from the start, but then we started chatting and I just carried on in brown. So there's not, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to add the colors later on. I might do. Sometimes it works really well to map things out, but sometimes when you want something to have a slightly softer look, then it's better not to, because even though a line is very fine, if you add a line around something, the look is instantly going to be a little bit different. So, and it's okay to have a bit of randomness to these as well, to these markings, because they, I know there's sort of a geometrical pattern, but each giraffe is still different and they all have their own sort of markings. So it's okay to give it a bit of randomness. Maybe this one a little bit larger. So. Here around the ear, they're getting really small here. And I think you can also see now that it's good to work on a fairly small bit of paper, because it just takes a bit of patience to fill your paper with all these fine lines. And the larger you work, the longer it takes. So I'm just getting a little bit of shadow here in front of the ear, because I want to keep the ear quite light, and by adding a little bit of shadow there really lightly, the ear itself will look a bit dark, a little bit lighter. Sometimes a bit of contrast is what you need to make something stand out a bit more. So and here above the eye there's some really light freckles. Sorry if my hand blocks the picture. So the longer you look at this picture, the more things you will notice. I've said this last time as well, but when you're looking at a photo, at first glance you realize, oh, this is a giraffe, and he's having his eyes closed or open, or just a sort of whatever you pick up in first instance. But then the longer you look at this, the more details you will start to notice about a picture, and the easier it becomes to draw those details out. I do that quite often. Well, not as often as I would like, but in the summer I do it quite often. But it's usually more the sort of landscape, because animals never stand still long enough to. This is why the zoo is good. So. Let me zoom out a bit again. There we go. I'm always constantly zooming in and out and making sure I'm sharp. There we go. So I want to add a little bit more warmer colors to these markings. So I started to do that here, but I think the rest, this looks a bit too red now, so I will go over there with a bit more brown. But I want to have some of those red colors in here as well. So. with each layer the color becomes a little bit more intense, a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated, I should actually say. Maybe you've already noticed some like little wrinkles or things that you think, oh, we'll add those in later on. So we're not actually doing any of those yet. But if you notice something like maybe here sort of on the neck, make a little bit of a mental note, like, oh, you're going to make them dark later on. Or sometimes I like to think a few steps ahead, just to sort of prepare myself a little bit. So look here for these hairs, for example, I've noticed that they seem a bit darker at the ends and a little bit lighter close to the neck. So when I start adding those in, and I start adding in the texture of the individual hairs, I can keep that in mind. Here it looks like it's windy a little bit. There's a few sort of going in that direction and a few going down. So later on I can, add that in a bit more. Sometimes I notice things that I don't actually use quite yet, but I'll sort of make a bit of a mental note of it for later on. So I think these can be a little bit darker. So once you're happy with the spots, you can go over there a few times, make them a little bit darker. Don't use that 10 out of 10 pressure yet, because once you add that much pressure to your pencil, so what sort of happens here is that the paper sort of gets compressed down. The pencil creates this really thick layer and it almost becomes like a really shiny, sort of closed off layer on the paper. And once you've reached that stage, you cannot add any other colors or anything to that area anymore. So you sort of closed it off and finalized that part. And it's okay to do that all the way in the end. But for now, we want to be able to add more different colors to our paper yet. So we're not quite ready to close the paper off. So I don't want to use that 10 out of 10 pressure anywhere yet. I want to have the freedom to, add a bit of yellow or add a bit of red and just change the tones a little bit. So there we go. I'm quite happy with the markings so far, and I think they will be a bit darker before the end. I'm quite happy with the way they look. And I'm going to really sharpen my pencil and start doing these manes that we can see all the way from the top. My giraffe sort of nods its head a little bit more, so it has a slightly different look, different curve, but I'm actually quite happy with it, so I'm just leaving that. So let's sharpen my pencil again, and maybe I can see a little bit of yellow in there as well. So I'm just going to go all the way over that edge and start adding in those little hairs. And I'm sort of for the first time really using the tip of my pencil, really the point. So far I've used more of the soft sort of side by using the pencil flat on the paper. And now we can start adding in some finer lines by using the tip of the pencil. So maybe a bit of yellow there as well. I'm trying to keep my colors quite natural today with these browns and yellows. But I've already added in, or of these with these sort of brown tones, but I've already added in yellow and orange and purple. So even though my final look is going to be quite a natural, sort of fairly realistic color scheme, I'm not making a blue giraffe today. But there's many more colors in there than you might see from a distance. I find that really fun when you're drawing color pencils. So you can just change the tone a little bit by adding in a little bit of yellow for warm, for adding in a bit of blue for colder tone. These colors don't tend to be so dominant that you then have a completely blue picture. So, and depending a bit on the type of pencils that you use, your colors might layer a little bit better or might blend in together a bit more. So some of my pencils, like these completely colored ones, they are on an oil based and they blend a little bit more. So if I go with this yellow over these other colors, the colors actually mix up a little bit. But then some of my other pencils are wax based and it's a little bit harder and they layer a little bit more, so the individual colors don't mix up like the way paints do, or crayons. I quite like both. There's benefits to both, and I like the slightly more vibrant colors of these oil pencils, but either way is absolutely fine for today. And the more you draw, at some point you'll notice a difference if you try lots of different pencils, but this is your first time, it doesn't really matter so much. As long as they give color, that's the main thing. So I actually want that yellow a little bit more all over. So a bit here in between those spots. I find yellow is a really great color to sort of bind colors together. So by just going over your drawing sort of like this with a bit of a yellow tone, you can sort of integrate the colors a little bit. Ooh, shaky camera. I wasn't actually going to do that yet, but because I was using yellow in the mains, I thought I might as well just add a little layer of yellow all over. It gives a bit of warmth to the drawing. And on that area here, that's sort of white. I'm putting the yellow over everything because I think even that ear or that area here is not like perfectly sparkly white. But it's up to you. If you want to keep it a little bit brighter, just keep it white. And if you quite like that yellow sort of tone, you can add it everywhere. So it's a bit of a style choice. I just find that it makes the drawing a little bit warmer, as you can see. It takes a bit of time and slowly the sort of shape starts to crystallize a bit more. Things get a bit darker. So, and I've not used any black yet. And I do have a black pencil and I will use it before I finish today. But I try to keep it a little bit in reserve for adding the final dark colors all the way at the end. Because black is quite an intense color. Can be a bit overpowering. So I'm saving it for later to add in that little bit extra. He's got that top lip is really quite long, isn't it? And when they sort of grab leaves, it's quite flexible, and they have really quite long. It's almost like a little tool that they can use for things. And if you haven't added it in, just really lightly make it a bit longer in your drawing. You can still just make some changes to those shapes. You don't have to. Just try not to create a really harsh outline, but just softly add a little bit to that area. I'm going to open it up a little bit, but it's so dark that it's quite hard to see sort of where the eye is. And so I will open it up a little bit, but for now, because the shape is sort of keeping it closed for now, it's just a sort of shed over. It's more to sort of know where the eye roughly is going to be, and if I'm happy with the placing, then. Because if I suddenly think, oh, actually the eye needs to be a little bit lower, because I have it so light now, I can still make some changes to it. So as soon as you go in really dark, it's really hard to make changes, but as long as you keep it light, you can still move things around a little bit till quite late. And actually, I'm sort of starting to reach that point where I want to add in some of these finer details. So I've really sharpened my brown pencil, and I'm going to go around here, around the nose. So I think the nose is a good place to start. I'm just looking at the actual shape of that nose, and it's really that sort of teardrop shape, isn't it? Really pointy, sort of here at the bottom, and then sort of rounded towards the top. And there's a little bit of a light sort of area around it with some shadows around that again. So that sort of nostril is a little bit lighter, and then it's really dark in the middle and a bit darker around there as well. So I'm quite happy with the shape. I've sort of added that in already a little bit with my shading. I'm just going to draw it out a little bit more. So using the tip of my pencil. So this is really pointy here. Just emphasizing it a little bit more. Maybe there's some wrinkles around here. So here, there's a bit of a sort of mark there. Here on the lip, just a little mark. So. And I'm still not using sort of the dark, like the most pressure that I can with my pencil, but I'm definitely slowly start to increase it a little bit and adding these darker lines. And because I have a really sharp tip on my pencil as well, I can really sort of go around there and yeah, make some harsher lines. So maybe this is a little bit finer. There's some shadow here on the side as well. I don't want it to look like he's sneezing. So maybe this is a little bit finer here. I can go in with some black there before the end as well. Because I know the brown looks quite dark now, but we have black to really make it really dark in some areas, and then that will make the brown look lighter again in comparison. Sometimes when you want something to look lighter, the best way of doing that is making something else darker, and then that comparison looks a little bit different. So just adding some lines here on the nose. There seem to be, it's more like a bit of a wave line. That's what I'm noticing. Maybe you see something else, that's fine. The lip, some little marks there. How far does that mouth carry on? So if the nose is sort of stopping here, maybe a little bit closer by. Where is my... I have a really light pink here somewhere. Yellow. So I'll just show you that if you go over an area that's quite dark with a light color, what happens is that you mix the colors up almost. So it doesn't necessarily become lighter, but it sort of blends in together a little bit. And some pencils do this more than others. This is why you cannot add in white over dark, because the colors just mix up together. But if you have some light colors, you can blend it a little bit and create sort of a smooth, blended surface. I think I've made the nose a little bit too large, but it's okay. I'll leave it like that for now. See if I can make it a bit smaller once I add in my black. So there's a bit of sort of bone structure here in the nose that creates some shadow. I'm going to draw out the shape of that eye in a little bit more detail. So I'm quite happy with where I placed the eyes. I'm going to leave it there, and then the top is a little bit more rounded than what I have it now so far. So I'm keeping it in brown, but I know it's going to be, I'm going to go over there with black before I finish to make it a bit darker. So I imagine the pupil to be sort of here. If it depends a bit on how large your screen is, you might see a bit more detail there than I am. They always look quite chilled out, I think, giraffes. They have these really long eyelashes and always look a bit sort of a bit sleepy. Yeah. They always have their eyes sort of at that half open stance. And animals don't usually show any eye white unless they're really scared. And there might be a few exemptions there. I can't really think of any at the moment. But most animals, you can only see the white of their eyes when they're scared. So you don't have to worry about leaving that light. You can sort of color that in a little bit. The entire eye is quite dark. You can try and use an eraser to take some of the color away, but it is quite tricky. So that's why I sort of take it really easy, because I find it much harder to take any of the color away than it is to add more. And the easiest way of doing it is with a kneading eraser. So this is my, you can see it's very grubby. This is my kneading eraser. So before I use it, I would have to knead it through, and then it sort of cleans itself. Again, they're really strange things. So it's almost like sort of a chewing gum type material. So the more you knead it through, the cleaner it gets again. And then because it's a bit sticky, it can go over areas and sort of lift up. Yeah, I can show you sort of here. You can lift up the color really carefully, and it sort of sticks to the eraser. So that's the best type of eraser to use with color pencils. Because if you use a block one, it very likely just smudges the color out over the paper, and it's really hard to take any of it off. I don't tend to use my eraser in this class. I tend to just draw over things and just leave it the way they are. Well, I do make mistakes, but it's easier just to leave them in than to try and take them out. But yeah, kneading eraser is the best one to use with color pencil. And if you find the eyes way too dark, think of a way of making everything else a bit darker as well, because the eyes are super dark. In that picture they're almost pitch black. And I will add some black to my drawing as well. So maybe see if you can make the rest a little bit darker to balance it out, and then see if that brings it a bit more together. Mine looks very light at the moment because it's brown. Yeah, compared to everything else, compared to the photo, it is still very light. So I think there's some hair sticking out of that ear. So. I think I will also add a bit of black to the... No, actually I'm going to add a bit of rainbow first and then do the black. I always want the black color to be the last one I do, because I find it smudges the easiest when I draw over it with a different color, and it's also so dark that I sort of want to save it till last. But I like the idea of the rainbow, so I need to remember to really go back to light So keep my pencil flat again, where I was using quite a lot of pressure on my pencil a moment ago. Now I want to go back and really softly add this in. The rainbow is very subtle, not really harsh lines. So, to remember the right colors, orange. And some light green. I'll try to blend these colors in with each other a little bit to keep it a bit soft. Oh, excuse me. I always sneeze a lot, I can't help myself. A bit darker blue and then purple. I don't think I'll make the entire sky blue, I'll just keep that white. So. It's very sweet, isn't it? So we'll draw a tough animal next week. Oh, actually, next week we're drawing a hedgehog, so much more prickly than this unicorn giraffe with his rainbow. So let's add some black. So I have this black pencil, which I always save not till last, but a little bit later in the drawing. So, and I'm going to really first go back with the amount of pressure I put on my pen, because here with the brown I was going in a little bit darker, and now I really, because this is such an intense color, I really want to scale it back and start really softly again. So let's start here around the mouth. I think it could be, I'm using the tip of my pencil, see how much darker that is. It instantly creates a lot of contrast. Just going to go around that edge, so where the shadow is more intense. So, there we go. I find that the little bit of black instantly makes a huge difference to the look of the drawing. That the brown is a very sort of soft, warm color and black is quite intense. So it makes a big difference. Here in that nose, I find I made the nose a bit too large, so I'm really trying to keep that area that I make dark now a bit smaller. So with the black I can change the shape a little bit. And then that eye, there's a lot of dark colors around that eye. There's a dark mark sort of here in front of the eye. And I cannot actually really see the details of the eyes, but I find if I just make it dark, it's I don't think it will read as an eye. So I'm just trying to create that shape, but I still make a bit of a circle in there to show that there's an eye in that really dark spot. So maybe this whole area could be a little bit darker. So here around the horns, there's a bit darker colors. So slowly and steadily the drawing starts to come together a little bit. We're not finished yet, but I start to realize, or to sort of see what the final is sort of going to look like. This is a good point to, something that you can always do is sort of take a moment, sort of take a bit of physical distance from your drawing. So what I like to do is sort of lift it up and look at it from a bit of distance. So I can zoom out with the camera. I've got many tricks of looking at my drawing from a bit of distance. Zoom out a little bit, just to sort of take a little bit of a different perspective. Sometimes when you sit so close in your drawing and you look at all those details, it's hard to see the sort of bigger picture, to see the whole drawing as a whole. So yeah, just to sit up straight and take a little bit of distance, or to hold it away from you for a moment, and just see if there's any areas that you feel need a little bit extra. So for example, I found that this ear disappears a bit. You can go in, make that a bit darker. Maybe this area here around the jaw. So these manes could be a bit darker. I'm adding in a bit of black. Maybe a little bit of black to these spots, to these marks. Really gentle, just to make the color a little bit darker here. So, and maybe here and there I want these spots to be quite a bit more intense than what they are now, especially the ones sort of here on the neck. So I'm adding layer over layer, maybe with not 10 out of 10 pressure, but maybe like a 7 or a 6. See if I can add a little bit more color to those areas now. There's not much texture that we have to think about in this fur. This is a very short-haired sort of type of fur that the giraffe has, so we can't really see long hair so flowing. So we don't have to think about texture too much, but I do want these colors to be a little bit more intense and to see the contrast between the light areas in between and the darker areas of these spots. Once you're happy with the shapes, it's much easier to add in the darker colors. Because you sort of know what direction you're going into. All the way in the beginning, if you instantly draw really dark, then everything is sort of set in its place. But now, in this way that we're doing it, there's a lot of freedom of moving things around a little bit, making some changes. I feel like my giraffe looks a bit a little bit arrogant, a little bit haughty. I don't know what he's looking at down there. But he has attitude. So, maybe you forgot a few spots on the head that you want to add in now. I think this whole nose, sort of this area, is much warmer. So I'm using this orangey, like a warm orange yellow color, just to go over here again. So it's like back to stage 1 with a bit more pressure, but I'm just adding a layer of warmer colors there. I think there's a bit of a tone, a slightly warmer tone. That's especially that part, sort of all the way up here to the horns. Maybe here as well on the neck. You have to be a bit careful around the details because colors can smudge a little bit sometimes. So if you decide to go over an area where you've added details, you have to be a bit gentle sort of around the fine lines because you don't want to smudge them out, and then especially the black color because it's such an intense pigment, smudges quite easily. I think he's going back and forth a little bit between smiling or not smiling. I always find it kind of funny that the all those sort of fine lines that you started with, they sort of disappear a little bit. So you can see only really fine. If you really need to zoom in, you can see that I had some sketch lines here for the horns, and then here sort of. And I decided to make things narrower a bit. Here's where the chin originally was, and I moved it. But those fine lines, they are, because they were so light, and because we started so light, you can't really see them anymore. Hard on ourselves, especially when we have the reference picture there next to, as a comparison.
Yeah.
But actually, when we take it away and you look at it in a few weeks' time or tomorrow, you think, oh, actually, I've done that really well, because you don't have that direct comparison.